Yeah, so what he did is he uploaded these demos on YouTube with the flags and symbols of the Islamic regime, with specific factions and groups of them who were involved in the torture of close members of my family. He emailed hundreds of press people with links to the video, pretending it was new music. He cited himself as one of the writers of this music, as well as my name, which implicated me because, it's considered a terrorist organization. These flags, these symbols, everything that represents, not only is that a terrorist organization, but that is against everything that I stand for as a person. As anyone who's been listening thus far will understand, that's a very extreme attack on me.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations podcast. I have a very special episode here for you all today. Now, of course, we are almost in the middle of November now, and it's coming up to my birthday very soon. And one of the most important things which I have personally been reflecting on is actually my own identity and upbringing. And why do I bring this up? Well, of course, I'm sure that many of you have seen some of the events which have occurred in Iran in the recent month or two now. It's coming up to 2 months now. And of course, I've been reflecting a lot on this, and I think sometimes it's good to be in touch with who you really are and where you come from. And of course, most importantly, what you stand for as a human being. So, of course, with that in mind, I thought, what a better opportunity to bring on the podcast a fellow countrywoman, I should say. And that is, of course, going to be my very good friend Nina, who is from the band Lowen in the UK. She's the vocalist for the band, and this actually turned out to be a very intellectually stimulating conversation, and I think we got a lot of really good stuff covered for you guys. And of course, we talked about Iran and her history with the place, because obviously I was born and raised there. She's never been, but we had a lot of common ground in the sense that we could not access this thing that we were both so close to at the same time somehow. So it was a very interesting conversation in that regards, but we also talked about arts, freedom of expression, and some crazy stories about an ex-bandmate of hers who turned into a stalker. So surely we'll be coming that your way. As always, I just wanted to take the moment to say thank you all for supporting Iblis Manifestations, for listening. If you're new to the channel, please feel free to subscribe, share, and share your thoughts and feedback. I'm always very open to all of that. So yeah, thank you all for your engagement, and it is truly humbling and exciting to see the community which is building around the podcast, and it is ever growing, and a lot of very interesting interactions are coming from these episodes. So yeah, without further ado, allow me to welcome my good friend Nina from the band Lowen to Iblis Manifestations. Enjoy, people. Okay, Nina, good evening. Welcome to Iblis Manifestations. It's good to have you on.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, I've actually been looking forward to this one for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, we happen to share somewhat of a similar heritage here, so I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. But I just want to talk to you about music and everything that's attached to that. First of all, how are you doing? How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I've had a really busy year, month, week, but I'm happy to be here. It's nice to be talking about music and the things that we love.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you guys seem to be on quite a bit of an uprise, I would say. Yeah, I mean, particularly since last year. Was Bloodstock last year when you performed?
It was last year. It feels like it was a few weeks ago, but it was last year.
Sure. Yeah, I remember seeing you. I think it was just before you guys went on stage, and then you seemed like it was one of them. It was like, oh, nice to finally meet you. But it was also like I wasn't sure if you're actually there. You know what I mean? Like it was like one of them things. First of all, how was that performance for you guys actually? Because you seem to get a pretty solid reception on that.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, I really wasn't expecting to be invited to play. And yeah, like we were supposed to go on. I think like Paradise Lost were basically running late, so we had to wait for them to finish playing. So we were all sitting on the Jaeger stage watching Paradise Lost, and there were like 100 people waiting for us to play. So we were just kind of like, I'm so sorry, we can't play until they finish. But everyone was so nice. Everyone waited. Loads of people who were walking away from Paradise Lost came and saw us too. Because I guess if you like their music, then there's some crossover with our old material. And it was really cool. It was just ace to play an open air festival. Hopefully not our last, but it was our first. And yeah, it was just cool. It was probably quite a diverse audience we had as well, which was really special. It's just amazing to meet people up north as well. Yeah.
Yeah. What you consider Bloodstock up north?
Well, I'm a dirty Londoner. Anything north of High Barnet is north.
Oh man, yeah, that's as a Yorkshire resident, I cannot relate at all.
My bad, my bad. I love Yorkshire though. It's so beautiful.
Oh, it's an awesome place, and people are so friendly, I mean, despite the hilarious accent, the people here are actually super friendly, and I've been here. I mean, I when I first moved to the UK, I spent sort of like the first, I guess, 4 years of it, 4 or 5 years in Birmingham. Which of course, Birmingham, and I went from there to obviously Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, and obviously now I've got the rest of the band in Trivex based up here as well, and it's really great, and it's cool to see how especially the music scene in particular has grown up here as well. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to bring Lowen up this end as much in the recent times.
Not recently. We've played Newcastle, we've played Leeds, we've played quite a few different places, but we haven't in the last year or so because we've been busy writing, and that's been our priority over shows. But I'm hoping we can soon. I've definitely found that the further away we get from London, the more enthusiastic people are, the kinder the response we get. But we have an amazing London fan base too. I just find that the quality of the sort of support you get for kind of more local music, perhaps is the word for it, is really like high the further out you get. Because I guess the scene is more important to the people who are local to the venues. You kind of have to keep it going.
Yeah, I think so too. Obviously, with London in particular, I can absolutely appreciate why you guys would be so well received over there. I think a lot of places, it's sort of like, I feel like there's a multitude of layers to which people can get into a scene, you know. So let's say if you're a newbie, if you want to call it, in this style of music and stuff, then it's helpful to have like some pretty straightforward shows to go to, you know. And by straightforward, I mean genres that are, I guess, a bit more accessible, more accepted, more concrete in terms of their popularity and cultural acceptance, if you will, as accepted as you can get, I guess, in our style of music. But I also feel like the more advanced people become in their listenings, you will find that, let's say, for example, you know, like you get into metal for the first time, and then a lot of us, we tend to get heavier and heavier and heavier. And then you get to a certain point, I feel, that it's like, well, you know what the heaviest sounds are. And that's still something that you chase. But at the same time, you then want to hear different things, you know, like the chase continues somehow. And through this, you then end up finding a lot of interest in, be it other styles completely, or other the things that are perhaps a bit more different. So it could be within the same subgenres or categories, but then it has its own twist to it, which I think could very well apply to you guys, for example, that it takes a certain degree of musical, I suppose, you have to be somewhat of a connoisseur to find yourself enjoying something like that. But then obviously as that grows, then it will reach higher numbers of people. So yeah, I can completely see how you guys would have a good following in London. I actually think you would also do really well in York. I don't know if you've ever been up there before.
We were invited to play York a few weeks ago, actually, but it clashed with something we were doing, which really sucked, because I would have loved to. It was like a festival up there. I'm hoping we can play next year. Fingers crossed we'll be invited again.
Yeah, sure. I might be able to bring you up myself. Let's see what we can do. We will talk after this. Yeah, York has a great scene. Well, I think the point which I was trying to bring up in regards to that, well, also that a lot of places, particularly in the UK, you will find that there's a local scene where there's a lot of people who, like I said, you know, you know, this is just what they listen to and this is what they like. And I find that there are places where York, for example, where it's not even really a local scene. It just happens to be that there's a lot of people from all around the world, particularly because it has a high student population. You've got people who are genuinely into the more niche side of things rather than just, hey, let's go down to the local pub and listen to some live music. They genuinely care about that particular underground movement and subgenre which we are involved with. And I find that you can get a pretty good response from those people, generally speaking, because at least they have a better base of understanding of what it is that at least we're trying to portray, and or at least they're more open-minded, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I think we had a similar sort of reception when we played Bristol. We were asked to play, oh God, years ago now. But I remember I specifically didn't really want to do any headline shows. I still don't, for a variety of reasons. But the promoter, he didn't tell us, but he made us the headliner. I did not think we were ready to headline. But I think the show sold out because it was packed. And like people, like an old woman came. She must have been in like her 70s. It was her first ever metal show. She just wanted to hear like the Middle Eastern singing. We had so many different kinds of people, students as well. It's got a big student population. And that was amazing. That was kind of the first time I kind of saw what you're saying. About those particular cities. You know, Brighton is the same. We have like an amazing turnout in Brighton recently, and it's kind of, yeah, it's like there's a really amazing core scene in Brighton with you know, people that you always see every time you go to a show there. But then yeah, you get like unusual people you wouldn't expect coming and seeing their first metal show. I've had quite a few people come to their first show to see our music, I guess because of the crossover. And it's always kind of, it's really special when someone has that experience with you. I guess you're popping their cherry. I don't know. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What's your objectification against playing headline shows? Or what's your beef with being the main band?
It's not necessarily beef. I'm just a bit lazy.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot of pressure as a band to do a lot of extra promotion, to make sure that there are lots of people there. And obviously I'll do it if we are made a headliner. I'll absolutely, we're getting to that point where maybe we are almost there. I think when we release our second album, we could headline some shows. But at the same time, I'd much rather be a support. You get to go on first and then you enjoy the night. You get to sound check first. You get to spend the rest of the night on the merch table. I don't speak before a show because it's like very vocally demanding what I do. So I won't, but I love to work the merch table as well. So ideally I play the show, I go on the merch table, I talk to everyone afterwards. That's like a big part of playing for me, is talking to people. But if I'm headlining, I can't do that. And I kind of feel like an asshole, to be honest. So
That's
I'd rather
thing.
not.
When you're a headliner, you get to be an asshole. That's the whole perk of it, right? No, of course. No, of course I'm joking when I say that. I mean, I appreciate that, in the sense that, we've done some headlines, obviously, and it is really stressful, especially like we did one in Brighton just last December, and we stepped in last minute. It was an awesome fucking lineup. It was a part of the Winter Assault show at Green Door Store, which I'm sure you're familiar with, being from around there. And it was just, I love those shows. They're amazing. We get to play longer, and for me, the longer time we've got on stage, I just feel like, we've got more time to kind of, get past that sort of initial kind of, and then we can actually people can understand us better, and then, we have a nicer rhythm going with them. So I do like having longer set times, but 100%, it's stressful as fuck, because just the feeling alone of anticipation that you're going to be sat around waiting to go on stage, and what's going to happen, and there's this whole internal whirlwind of emotions, of excitement, anxiousness, just all kinds of feelings, everything turned all the way up, and then you're somehow supposed to act normal for like 7-8 hours waiting at the venue for until you actually have to go on. I understand that sort of discomfort, but I suppose at the same time, especially for you guys, eventually it's only going to be a natural step that I think you will just have to step in that position and fill the shoes, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I find as well, I think it's interesting you describe this emotional state, because I thought I don't think it was just me, but I didn't imagine as many people have the same thing. But yeah, maybe as well when you're a front person, I think it's amplified a little bit, because you are kind of the conduit of connection when it comes to the sort of most common audience perception, I guess, because there are some people who focus on the guitarist, some people who are like, oh, I love the drumming, but usually people are kind of focusing on the front person because they're delivering as well, like the lyrics, the impact most of the time. But yeah, like I don't get stage fright, but I do get really sort of tumultuous. I don't know what the word is. I have anticipation, extreme anticipation before a show, which I deal with by preparing really hard for the show. I'll do like really intense warm-ups, vocal exercises. I eat very particular things on the day of a show. I do things in a very particular way. I'm probably a bit OCD, I guess. But yeah, doing that and then like going to the headline, playing at 9 p.m. instead of, 6 or 7 or later sometimes. That's a lot, but I will do it. If it means we've got to a point where enough people want to see us that we can do it, I would happily do that. I'd love it. That would be amazing in itself, and the payoff would be that. But at the moment, I definitely prefer sort of doing it sooner, dealing with like the endorphins you get afterwards with the social environment you have around you, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, it's that as the front person, as you put it, that you've got a lot going on. I don't think personally that it all just boils down to, I guess, the physical aspect of it, which you would, and by physical, I mean, let's say, the interaction with the audience, am I hitting the right notes? These things, that I call the physical aspect. But I think the more intense aspect of it, which I guess is more emotionally related, is the simple sheer expression that is going to take place, and it's that, you've spent this time crafting your art, throughout various different points in your life. And just the fact that you get to step on a stage, that's an opportunity, right? And that to me is almost entirely separated from whether how much you're getting paid for a show, how many people are there. Just the fact that you're getting to step inside that place, to me a sacred place even, that you then get to become the vessel and channel those energies through the music, through the art, and especially as a vocalist, especially one of the style that you're performing in. Just the fact that you are going up there and, I would say, bravely singing these songs in Farsi lyrics, which of course we'll get into more, but I think that alone is quite a big deal. Never mind that, okay, now how's the volume on stage and the monitors. I think there's a lot more going on than just behind that I suppose could very much contribute to the state of mind and emotions that we can be in leading up to the show.
I totally agree with that. What you say, I forget sometimes, but I think there is something that is different about our music from a lot of like music you'll commonly find being made in this country, I guess, in particular. Because what I'm doing is I'm singing. It's me. Like, I'm bearing myself on stage, even though I might be singing about goblins or aliens or whatever. I love fantasy and that shit, but I love that stuff. However, what I'm actually doing, what I'm actually feeling, and what I'm communicating, and people get that when they hear me singing it, is pain, like intense disconnection, and what it's like to have been torn away from something. And this is something everyone can relate to on some level, right? And when you're channeling that, it's a very personal, intimate thing. So when you're doing that in front of a room of people you've never met, or in front of a room of people that you know well enough that they're judging you in that moment, perhaps, I mean, that doesn't bother me so much, but all those things swirling together in your mind, it definitely does have a big impact on how you're feeling on the day.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. I mean, sometimes I find it actually relieving, in a sense that, I don't know, I find that sometimes I connect the best to the audience by separating myself from them, in the sense that I separate myself from the interactions, or rather the expectations, and I make it all about what it is that we are trying to say, what it is that we are trying to perform, and the music. That's what I make it all about. I forget where we are on the lineup, whether we're headlining or whether we're playing fucking 9:30 in the morning. I've never done that before, but just as a metaphor, and I separate myself from all these things, and I find myself in the moment, and just from like you said, just from how bare it is, just the sheer nakedness of the experience, that's when I feel personally connect the most and channel the most of these energies. But one thing that you said that I found quite touching was that you said about the feeling of pain and the detachment, that being ripped apart for something. You are, of course, the same as myself, a Persian, and of course, that for everyone who is like, what the fuck is a Persian? That's the technical term would be an Iranian, but of course, many of us, I think, I was having this conversation with someone just recently, actually, because she was like, well, what is a Persian? And I said, well, it's just Iranian people, but we don't, a lot of times we don't like to refer to ourselves as Iranians. And this is nothing, because we've got nothing against our heritage, but rather because we don't want to be associated with the government and the ruling powers back in the country. And I think that's a relatively accurate description of why that is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a very important thing here. So I'm just wondering if you can just give us a little bit about your background. Obviously, because that's a rare thing, right? How often do you see someone performing this type of music and actually being from that background as well? And of course, we will then get into more the aspects of what it actually means to be a female singer in this, and then have that background at the same time. But just if you could perhaps get a little bit more into your background, as I am quite curious to know that anyway.
So basically, my parents fled Iran during the 1979 revolution. They didn't meet each other until they were both here in the UK. I can't go too into detail about certain things about my family without putting them in danger. As anyone who has any notion of what's happening in the world right now would hopefully understand. But members of my family were imprisoned in Evin, which is currently on fire for over a decade. And various prisons in Iran for certain reasons that I can't go into on this podcast without putting me and others in danger. My family were torn apart by the revolution. I have family members in Germany, Sweden, America, Italy, all over the world. And I have only seen my grandparents once, ever in my whole life. The last conversation I ever had with my grandmother was 2 years ago, just before she died. In that conversation, she begged me to come to Iran. She was like, when will I see you? Please. She said, Kemi, over again. When will you come? When will you come? My whole life, since I was born, has been about Iran, because I've never been able to go. I've never been allowed by the embassy to go. If I were to go to Iran, I would be detained at the airport and probably sent to heaven. And this was even before I did journalism, before I did music. I would not survive going back to Iran. I wouldn't be able to see my family. I had to see my grandparents in Sweden and Turkey, because that's what a lot of people like me do, who are kind of exiled, born in exile. We have to make do like that. There are hundreds of family members that ideally would love to see aspects of my culture that I want to engage with. And the only way I can really do it is to make music, is to sort of read about it, understand more about it, meet other people like you, like Kathy, who I guess only me and it's a very strange thing to be in the diaspora as a Persian, as an Iranian, whatever you want to call us. It's a very painful thing to be constantly treated as an interloper in this country. Not by everybody, but there have certainly been a lot of very bad experiences that I've had at the hands of certain people because of my heritage, just because I don't fit in. Even though I have this posh voice, I'm highly, highly educated. I speak multiple languages, but still that's not good enough. That's not integrated enough just because of how I look or how I dress or what I do. And it would be, if I were to go to Iran, I would still be a foreigner. So I don't really have a home. I don't have a place to exist in, which is why I've always been drawn to fantasy and space and other worlds, because that's the closest thing I kind of have to, I don't know, I feel like I understand those places better than a lot of other places. I don't know, a lot of other countries. I don't know what it is to have that kind of cultural home. So I have this world of Iran that I've always grown up with in my head, which is probably far more fantastical and incredible than the actual place. However, I want to die in Iran. I want to go to Iran the moment it's possible. I am going over there and I'm going to see what it's all about.
so much of what you said resonated with me there. It's interesting. Obviously, for me, I exiled myself at the ripe age of 16. But again, just to reiterate the point, I can relate to this because obviously I've spent a considerable number of years away from my own family since I left. I think I've seen my parents a total of, I put it together actually, I think it was a total of 3 months that I've seen my parents in the last 11 years. And, it's not exactly easy. It definitely has had I can see the positives in the sense that I've had no choice but to grow. I've had no choice but to become a stronger person and become more resilient and have to actually see things rather than just seek comfort and just the usual stuff that everyone else does. Really, I've kind of had no choice but to be detached from some of that, in a sense. But at the same time, it's incredibly difficult, and that feeling that you've not even described the feeling, but I'm getting it. There's this thing of you've got something that is so close to you, yet you're so far away from it. And it's difficult because it feels like the country's got cancer.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really good way of putting it.
And it feels like it's currently going through at least some form of chemotherapy.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, which of course is going to be terrible for everyone involved. I think, because there's obviously everything that's happening right now, but I mean, just beyond that, like I said, at least I self-exiled, so at least I've seen it. But one thing that you said that really, really like resonated with me was the fact that you said if you went there now, that you still wouldn't be from there, right? And obviously there's the prejudice that you may face over here. That is something that I feel like personally I've made peace with for the most part, because I think that a lot of times the way someone might perceive you, because that's an external prejudice, right? It's not internal one. It's not that you don't feel at home here, or I mean, perhaps that still might not be the case. But generally speaking, if someone is making any kind of prejudice against you just based on anything, that is more often than not just a reflection of that person, if that makes sense. And a lot of times it's there are willful ignorances when it involves something like that. So I would never take anything like that to heart if I were you or anyone else who's in that similar position. But as far as going back home, well, see, I called it home, going back to Iran and not necessarily feeling at home. This was the case for me because I was actually lucky. Like, out of a few of my friends who are actually from over there and they've been in a similar journey, I actually did have the opportunity to go back. I mean, it's been a very, very long time. I haven't been back there for fuck knows since like I was like 21 years old now, or maybe even younger. But the weird thing about it was that it was like, when I went back, it was like, this is not what I remember. And I think a part of this was also because I was no longer who I was before I left. Like before I left her, I was just, more or less a teenager / young adult who just liked to play fucking black metal and like to go down and cause all kinds of fucking havoc. I mean, I did a lot of very dangerous, stupid things that could have easily got me killed over there. Some possibly very blasphemous things too. Might have involved burning a piece of paper or perhaps a bunch of them. But anyway, that's a different story. We can only get into so much trouble over this podcast. But the point that I'm trying to make, just to digress, is that that was also the feeling that I had. It was like I was there, I was at home with my family, but it was just like I didn't feel a sense of belonging anymore, you know, and that was extremely confusing because I was like, oh, where the fuck is home? You know, where am I going? You know, it's like when I came back, it's like I always listen to. I know it's already a very popular song, but I always listen to Metallica's "Wherever I May Roam," and that fucker that hits me differently. You know, the lyrics. I don't know how much you might remember it off the top of your head, but goddamn, that's like, you know, it's extremely relatable. And yeah, it's just, and it's such a beautiful country. It's such a fucking beautiful country with so much history and culture, you know, just even from the sheer mannerisms that our people have. It's not replicated anywhere else in the world. And unless you've seen it, unless you've been there, you might automatically associate it with perhaps other countries of the same region or even same continent. But it has nothing to do with any of that. We are our own unique thing. You cannot change this. And I think only perhaps you and I, or those of us who are from there, might understand this. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I do agree. You know, I think it's really interesting what you say. There is so much in Iran that even as someone who's not been there, but I can feel that I'm from there. Does that sound weird? I just know I have this pull that's always been sort of, I guess, in whatever it is you would call a soul for as long as I can remember. And it's such a beautiful country, as you say, not only geologically, physically, but yeah, the people just know poetry. People just recite poetry. There's like that bridge in Esfahan where people gather in the evenings and sing. I mean, the women can't do that, but maybe one day they will. You know, that's amazing. That's so cool that people can just, as a casual hobby, just go and sing in this beautiful bridge that has amazing reverb and look out on the water. Well, now it's been stolen, but that's another thing. You know, and like the literary history, the mythological history, the war history, the empire's history. It's all fascinating. There is so much culture that people have tried to erase, but what I love about that country is that people haven't been able to erase it, you know. And I don't know if it's nationalistic, how I feel, because I feel like it's more of a resistance to what's happened, you know. Like I feel like there's different kinds of nationalism, and it tends to arise when there is this kind of oppression. And you know, it was used by, I believe, the Shah to sort of make people support him by using, you know, he was a military general, his Reza's father. They were installed by the West. They were given leeway by the British to go and take hold of Esfahan. But, you know, he decided to change the name of the country to be more old school, to be related to the mythology, you know, using calling himself a king, all this stuff, you know, this is rooted in a kind of nationalism that's used to control. But I also think that there's a nationalism of resistance. And I don't say this in a right-wing way, not in any sense. It's more of as an individual, as a collective right now, people are fighting for that Iran. For, you know, that's what people are actually fighting for. You know, a freedom of being able to live in a country where you can sing, where you can make art, because that's my understanding of that country is that potential of that's what everyone who lives there has. There's always been this emphasis on the arts from childhood, you know, like the stories that I grew up with. I would be sent these little books. Like the first page would always be Khomeini's face, but then the second page would be these incredible stories, you know, with incredible illustrations. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. I literally have on the bookshelves behind me many of these books filled with propaganda, but then also filled with the resistance, with the stories that they can't take away from us.
Listen, the amount of times when I was a teenager or even in school, the drawings I did all over Khomeini's face for years. I mean, it went from like silly shit when I was like maybe 8, 9 years old to I used to always draw him a nice corpse paint whenever I was like 14, 15. Used to always give him a nice inverted cross in the forehead and everything. I mean, fuck that guy. But about the thing, I mean, he's a fascinating figure. Don't get me wrong. He's very, very, very fascinating. As much as I want to piss on his grave, he's a fascinating guy. See, the thing is, what you said about the resistance, that is not confined by left wing or right wing or any of that bullshit, frankly. I think that is resistance of perseverance of identity. And this is, like you said, this is something that there's been, I think, quite a lot of effort to remove and tarnish this identity. But it has not. And I don't think there's anything wrong with actually having any kind of pride of where you are from. And, obviously this applies to anyone. I get why people relate that to right-wing ideology, but also having that pride towards your heritage is something that we should all have an understanding of. And on one hand, I don't encourage the idea of, because this is a criticism to Iranian people also, is that just because we have this history, just because we have this insane rich culture, a lot of times we also feel like we've achieved something without having actually achieved something. Does that make sense?
I think that's a valid criticism, to be honest. And I think this is something that a lot of I think this is the thing, like there is a difference between someone of a dominant culture, let's say, having this obsession with heritage, people who are like, I'm a Viking, where they have like the weakest chin you've ever fucking seen. They've never lifted a weight. They can't do you know what I mean? Like those people, those heritage, not hate, but really they do hate anyone who's not like them. That's different. Like this is more, as you say, it's, we have to connect with our identity because it's being taken away from us. And like if you are of a culture that is the majority culture where everything is aimed at you and you think that, I think that's like you're kind of being obsessed with being a victim there. Whereas if you have literally can't go home because you'll be killed, then like fair enough. When Iran was Islamized, you had the 200 years of silence. Was it 100 years of silence? There was not a single book written in the original language. Everything became Arabic. Everything became, about Islam. And in that time, there was no art. There was nothing. It was literally a period of artistic silence. And stuff like that is why it's important, I think, to engage, with the history of a culture like Iran, because it's been fucked with so much. We need to keep that shit together for people in the future to know what, I don't know how important that is, but for me it's important. I don't think that no one else who isn't Iranian should go to, should be kept out of Iran. I don't think that there should be some kind of supremacy of Iranians being like, oh no, you're not, you don't know enough about the Shahnameh, you can't come in. I don't think anything like that should happen. I think anyone should be able to go to Iran, including Iranians, and be able to experience it without being executed because they're gay, or if you do a sing, then they hang you, because that's what can happen right now. My mum was actually in Iran until last week. So she was there for about, I know. She went there in August, and then everything kicked off. They cut off the internet. And it was the most scared I've ever been in my life. I would rather I was there than someone I love, than my mother. And she managed to make it back by the skin of her teeth. Like, she was in the airport. They were calling people to be arrested. They were pulling people off on the airplane before it took off. That's how close it was, and I have people that are close to us giving interviews on the BBC and Sky News about what's happening. So we were really scared. Like, I did not know she'd made it until I saw her in the airport. When she walked out of the gate, it was yeah, we ran towards each other and cried. It was one of those moments. It was very scary, and it really, this stuff doesn't just affect people living in the country. I'm nowhere near as affected as anyone living in the country, nowhere near by a country mile. I am so privileged to be in this country in that respect. I am so much safer here, even though people have tried to fuck me over in this country in that respect. I don't know how much you know about the history of my band.
We will get into that. We will get into that later, but let's, let's
focus on this for now. Totally. But yeah, that's part of my story. This is why I find it important to try and engage with where I'm from, why it's important for me to have an involvement in the sort of diaspora, because this is how I feel connected to a sense of home. And I agree with what you say about, most of the time I don't really care. I don't care at all what people think of me, frankly. Otherwise I wouldn't get up on stage and sing in Sumerian and sing about literally goblins. I wouldn't do that if I cared about what people think of me. I'd stay home and do nothing. But I think there are times where people try and force that prejudice onto me, and those are the times where I'm not necessarily upset. I'm angry. I feel like that's when I really feel like I shouldn't really be here. I need to be somewhere else. I want to be somewhere where that's not so commonplace. Like, I don't care if someone calls me slurs or whatever. That's fine. I just think they're a stupid person if that happens. But yeah, as we'll get into later, there are times where that literally does put me, not the slurs, where other things put me and others I know at literally risk. And the position I'm in this country is still quite vulnerable. There are new laws that have been introduced where I could just be fucking deported for no reason. I've had to be I don't know if you saw, there's a new law. If you have any even potential to be a citizen of another country, the UK government can just deport you with no given reason. Yeah.
That's very nice of them. Thanks.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's becoming an awful lot like other countries we know that we don't like very much. So yeah, there's stuff like that things like that make me feel like I don't belong here more than someone looking at me funny in Tesco or calling me names. That stuff I think is just stupid, very entry-level racism.
I mean, just listen to what you just said. Could you sound more British? Someone looking at me funny in Tesco and saying something like,
yeah, that's fine. Like,
that's as authentic as you can fucking get.
I am inherently very British. I love high tea. I like Monty Python. I have a funny accent. I love British poetry. I did 18th century studies for my master's. Like, I'm very bloody British. I swear like a British person. But then at the same time, when I'm in pain, I'll make an Iranian sound. I won't say ow, I'll say I. It's like all these different things that are confusing to exist within.
Yeah, sure. I understand that. I mean, yeah, listen, you already know my thoughts on that. I think it's a very, it can be a double-edged sword sometimes, but I think just in regards to Iran alone, I think there's obviously one big elephant in the room here where we've both brushed on it, but we are yet to completely point at what the fucking problem is. But just as a question, how much do you think, now obviously this is regardless of the historical impact and the architecture and everything that came after it, which was quite amazing, but how much do you think that the initial Islamification of Iran completely fucked with our history?
It's a really good question. I'm not a scholar on this matter, so I cannot give a particularly great answer, but I think it fucked with it really badly. My personal opinion is that the most bad thing that happened to Iran was actually the interference of the West, which started in the 1900s when, what was it? I wrote it down. So it's now called British Petroleum, BP, but it used to be called something else. They had a different name. They were called you know what? It's actually really hard to find this information on the internet. And I'm sure there's a reason why, because they don't want you to know. But basically, a British company bought 50% of the shares in an oil field in Iran. And after that, everything went downhill, basically. They had a majority shareholder. They became a majority shareholder company. Iran basically kept, I think, way less than 25%. I think it was 16% of its profits in oil, which, considering it's, the fourth biggest producer in the world, is a significant, like, the rest of the world is getting 70% of the profits and then selling that oil back to the country at a 300% the price. That's every single time Iran tried to gain control of its oil reserves, somehow the government changed, or the prime minister was assassinated, or the Shah was deposed, and then, oh look, these horrible this regime suddenly has appeared, when really that revolution was never an Islamic one. It wasn't Islamists that started that revolution. It was socialists. It was feminists. It was in the hands of the people until it was taken away from them by America, by the UK. If you actually look into the history of Iran in the last 120 years, you'll be surprised to find there's a really big pattern in who is actually behind the tragedies, who's actually forcing the things the way they are. Because I think we could have survived the Islamification quite easily once Westernization, if you want to call it that, once modern technology became introduced, because it became a more international place. Even when the Islamification started, people did resist. Like, you have the Zurkhone, for example. It's, for those who don't know, it's a strength house where people will train with meal. They're like these big sort of chicken wing, gigantic shaped or drumstick shaped wooden things. You do like crazy exercises with them.
Just check out the Iron Sheik.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the Persian clubs, that's what we call them. Yeah.
Yeah, you trained with sword, you trained with mace, but basically the Zurkhone started because once the Islamists came, you weren't allowed to have a military. So the military disguised themselves as exercising this sport in the Zurkhone, where they would play beautiful music, they would play drums, and men and women would train. Women were only banned very recently, in the last sort of 2 years, from training in Zurkhone. And they preserved their culture. They preserved their military ability through the Zurkhone. So if there ever was an uprising, they would be trained in a military level to take on this invading force, which is what they tried to do. And I respect that. That's the stories that we tell each other, that we tell ourselves, the narratives we tell ourselves are the most. They shape us. They shape who we are. They shape how we interact with the environment. They are the most powerful tools that we have as people. And, those stories aren't exclusive to a country or a culture, but they certainly make a country feel the way it does, if you know what I mean.
I 100% know exactly what you mean. And just to backtrack a moment as well, in summary, I would actually even say that the fact that we do have the Islamic Republic in Iran is directly the fault of the West.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because, who the fuck brought Khomeini around? Who gave him that influence? That
they gave him the money. They gave him the guns. Yeah. Literally just handed it over.
Yeah. And in a sense, he got in power and he turned around and gave the finger, was like, yeah, fuck you guys. And now I'm going to take the entire country back to the dark ages with me, and we're still there. And that's only one side of it. We can go further back, a little bit closer to the root of where a lot of this also started. You mentioned about the oil companies, and you can look at Mossadegh, and everything that happened with him. I mean, also, to be fair, Mossadegh was a communist, and then there's like things to look at there as well. But generally speaking, I'm not saying I'm a direct supporter of Mossadegh, but you can also look at just the way that basically, I think the MI5 and CIA kind of conspired to basically get rid of this guy. He's like, who the fuck is he? He's there trying to cut our hands off of the oils and everything like that. And obviously, there's like a whole story of how it goes, where basically they hired people pretending that they were acting on his behalf, who were going around the streets pulling the hijab and then scarves off of women's head, and then causing harm, and then disturbance, and then everything like that. And then it all kind of went to shit. And this was because he basically cut off their access to the oil, saying like, what the fuck are we doing any deals with them? And then it was all just really awkward. And then they were putting the pressure on the Shah. And I mean, Mossadegh ended up dying in house arrest in the end. But I think that the turmoil that caused, which was all just because of Western greed, greed is all it was. That is, you could very much point that to being the root of what I suppose ended up leading to the Islamic Revolution that happened, and even Khomeini himself, coming out saying, "Oh yeah, we are for the people, and we're gonna have the Islamic Revolution, and if you don't like it after some time, then we will leave." Like that, they said shit like that. It's like, I don't know if you knew that Khomeini actually said that if you don't like it after a while, we will leave. It's like, okay, you cunts are still here, and we fucking hated you for pretty much the entire thing, And listen, the political landscape of the world is far more complicated. I mean, the Islamic Republic is a problem, of course, but is a problem for the people of Iran before anything. On one hand, the rebel in me kind of likes that the country can be such a middle finger to everywhere else in the world. But then I'm like, but look at what it's doing to us. Look at the culture. Look at how fucking crippled people are financially, and they're sending these people to the streets to fucking beat up like all random citizens. And you see footage of like some old guy just getting fucking kicked in the chest just by some of these fucking officers. Listen, I have a lot of doubts and suspicions, because I'm a naturally very suspicious person. Like anything that gets on the news, I'm like, why is this on the news? I don't trust it, right? This is me. This is my initial reaction to everything. And the older I get, the more actually a lot of these suspicions are confirmed too, whilst I still maintain an open mind about stuff. So the situation that is currently happening with Iran, where for anyone who's been living under a stone, there's a lot of fucking protests and riots everywhere, all over the country, unlike it ever has been in the last 40 years since the revolution happened. But the way it sort of started is very questionable to me. We've never had anything like this get so much coverage ever before. So as far as I know, people have been getting killed and murdered there all the time. Why is it that all of a sudden, one case, which is still a terrible fucking case, that should have never ever happened? However, this is the first of thousands and thousands of cases like this have happened. I've had my own friends fucking arrested and like pepper sprayed for just playing fucking metal, let alone something like this, where it's like the hijab is a serious fucking thing to them, and obviously the question of hijab is a separate other thing that, that's
so many kettles of fish.
That's its own fucking beast to battle. But just that alone, I'm really concerned. I am genuinely concerned for the safety and the security of the people, because let's say if this is some kind of Western propaganda again, it will certainly not be at the best interest of the Iranian people. That's for sure.
That's interesting, because I agree that I have the same concerns, that I worry that the West will use this as an excuse to intervene, like they have in all the countries they've fucking destroyed by intervening to steal the oil. However, I do feel that there isn't a huge amount of coverage of what's happening. And when things have been covered, I found that it's been very skewed, as in, like, I'm talking about mainstream media here. When I've posted about anything on Instagram, the reach on those posts have been so limited to the point where people have noticed that they're being shadow banned just for talking about what's happening there, just for posting about, you know, if you so much as like if you so much as like say something crazy on, you can say some crazy fucking shit on Instagram and Facebook and it's fine, you know, but you post about women protesting in Iran, that's not okay. And that's fucking weird. Like, I think it's, I don't know. I don't know if I fully agree with what you're saying, because I do think there's been some limitations by the West on how much information is getting out, because I think that the West don't want people to know that women are doing a whole revolution and that that's possible. You know, like if people don't like something, they can set it on fire. And like, if you look at the state that this country is in, if you look at the state of America, which is literally a third world country with good PR, like if people find out that you can just go and say, I don't like that, I think, you know, that's what they don't want people to see. I don't think they want people to see that women specifically, you know, are starting this revolution and are the people who are carrying it forward. And I think that's the thing that's been different. You know, the people I know who've been there have said that's what's different about this one, is that it's women who are the people who are pushing it forward. And when women are angry, like, I think it takes a lot to anger women. I think it takes a whole lot. Like, and when women are angry, we are fucking scary. We are much scarier than men when we're angry.
Know that.
Especially Iranian women.
Yes.
You know, and, you know, Iranian women are the most educated. They are so educated. The literacy rate is higher in women than men in Iran. There's more women by far in universities than men in Iran. Women are at the forefront of society, you know, and yet they're at this place in a country that specifically limits them because it can see how much potential women have. And I think if people were to see that from the outside, I think it would radicalize some people. I think it would make some people think, hang on, like, I live in this society that's supposedly free that also limits me in this way. I'm not happy with how things are. What if I did something? And I think that goes against the interests of the powers that be, the status quo in these societies.
Okay, very interesting counterpoint there. The thing that I will say is I have also noticed that they have silenced a lot of social media posts and things like that. However, I feel like the timing might be relevant, right?
Yeah.
Because wasn't fucking Biden and co, weren't they just having some negotiations?
Yeah, they
with
were.
a few people from Iran?
I think it's to do with oil. And
wasn't it that before that everything was very loud and pushy on the subject of Iran, where literally every major corporation, or at least most of them on the West, were putting stuff like, you know, support the women of Iran and shit like that, and now they've all gone quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and when all of this happened, I know this other girl over here, and she's Iranian, and I said to her, I said, look, how do you know this is not just some kind of leverage by the West? Because it's like, the Islamic Republic, they're powerful. They're really fucking powerful. And I think that our people over there are so fed up and so, they're just so afraid, you know. But this is a government that you know, this is a government that's got access to nukes and shit. And yes, you can cripple them by, if everyone in the country decides to pull their money out of the bank and things like that and run to the streets, yeah, you can really cripple a government. But still, because you got to think that in the last however many years, whilst every country around us has been completely fucked with, and by us, of course, I mean Iran, that's what we're referring to. But you look at what's happened in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, you know, I mean, the United States were fucking supporting the guy during the Iran and Iraq war just after the fucking, you know, revolution happened. And then these cunts are fucking sending chemical bombs and killing children. And you know, the amount of, I mean, we call it the Razman Dagon, all of the disabled veterans that we still have in the country from that, you know, who were subject to the chemical attacks by Iraq. And then all of a sudden, the war doesn't, like Iran kicks Iraq's ass, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, like Saddam Hussein's, public enemy number one, let's get him. It's like, and then there's fucking, you look at every other country around us, you look at Afghanistan, holy shit, and then and everything that's happened there. But you have all of this surrounding Iran, yet we have pretty much never really had any legitimate terror attacks or anything like that. If we've had anything, chances are it was actually orchestrated with the government themselves, to kind of be like, oh, yeah, because there was something that happened recently and like hardly anyone got hurt by it. And it was like, this is suspicious, and again, maybe that's just me thinking like that. But and not to obviously get too twisted into the subject of politics, but just generally speaking, we have to acknowledge that the Islamic Republic has a very powerful position. And it's not going to be just a matter of day and night where the people just overthrow the government. I mean, maybe they can, who knows? But we have to be really careful. We have to look at what we're surrounded by. We've got Taliban right next to us. We've got, the fucking... perhaps a part of why we've never been touched by ISIS is the fact that these assholes are in power. And it's like the douche and a turd sandwich. It's like whatever that happens, our people have to pay the price somehow. And all I'm just saying, I'm not against the protests happening in Iran, because the government has to change its ways. Absolutely, they must change their ways. Culturally, it's fucking bullshit, right? You and I should be able to freely go there, and if we want to perform arts, if we want to play our music, and if we want to sing, we should be able to do that. I obviously did this, and not to make you jealous, but I did actually play. I did play 3 underground shows in Tehran just before I fucked off. So that was very nice. And
that was amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah, I've been fucked up in the head ever since I had those experiences. And I feel like every time I play a show over here, even though we can do it properly, it's always like I'm trying to live up to the intensity and the craziness of what those shows were. But anyway, I digress. All I'm saying is that we just have to be careful, and something has to change. But yeah, I don't think it's quite as black and white as we are, as it seems. All of these, like, and like I'm with the people. Of course, I'm with the people. There might, like I want them to be happy, and I want things to be well, but just having some tiny understanding of the geopolitics of the world, and I guess who also owns the banks in the world, I'm like, who do we have to support here? Does that make sense? So it's literally like the country's got cancer, and it feels like to remove that cancer, you'd have to destroy the country, basically. And that's why it's a very, very difficult position to be in, as far as I'm concerned.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think that there can be no good outcome with this government. They're selling the water to China, to other countries. It doesn't matter that it's China. They're selling the water. The country is experiencing drought. As a result, the temperatures in the south were over 50 degrees this year. I mean, they usually are, but in like areas where people were having to work outside, in the oil fields, in factory environments with like big industrial machinery. And it got so bad the workers were striking. The government sent down a spokesperson, and he fainted when he stepped off the plane because it was so hot. Like, this is the kind of... I think you're right when you say the government's powerful, but when it comes to the people, when it comes to the power over the people of the country, yes, they're incredibly powerful. People are fucked, but when it comes to the geopolitics, I do think they are in a very shitty position. But it's still shitty for the people, for Iran, far more than it is for them, because they can just go and live in LA or in Canada or Kensington, and that's what a lot of them do. They just sell up and move shop and set up somewhere else with the blood money of Iranian people. And that makes me really angry, because those people don't care about Iran. You know, they don't give a fuck. They don't belong. I don't think they feel like it's their home. You know, if they'll happily do that, if they'll happily fuck over the people of the country. And I think the government here is the same. I think, you know, the way that the government here handled, you know, these fucking bogus COVID deals with the PPE, and the way they're like just you know, putting sewage in the water and shit like that. Like, they don't give a fuck about this country. I don't think they view this as their home either, because they are literally setting up and moving shop. The same with the Islamic regime. You know, the differences between these governments are not as big as you'd think. You know, we're literally going to have like re-education camps in this country for people who don't like it very much. So I'm sure I'll see plenty of my friends there when they open them up. You know, like, we have offshore holding centers for immigrants that have been displaced here by wars that this country is involved in. And, you know, I feel like these levels of cognitive dissonance, I'd say, are shared across the world. I think the government of Iran is standing alone amidst multiple, as you say, multiple countries that have been fucked over by the West, and I think they're next.
You said that Iran is alone in this, and I would actually say that they've got the blessings of China and Russia, and you know, that's kind of like they're not in a great position, but no one is really. You know, I mean, the entire world feels like we're just on the brink of a complete disaster, and it feels like all of these micro things that are happening, you know, could at least lead to some sort of a disastrous situation, you know. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that we keep coming back to is that it's the people that are going to pay for it. I mean, you're absolutely right. What you said about the government here and how they treat their own people. I mean, you can very much see this with America and everywhere, and how all of these countries approach the pandemic and absolutely milk their own population, milk the, you know, like they completely took advantage of the population's finances, completely risked everyone's mental health over nothing, you know, over things that now looking back at it, it almost seems like, oh yeah, they knew how some of these things were going to affect things in the long run. And it was, a lot of it just comes down to being a solid business plan as well as a powerful control model. And this is why I you know, coming from Iran, I know the mentality of Iranian people. And this is not a bad mentality as such, but it doesn't include the entire truth. And it's that when you're over there, obviously, especially me growing up as a teenager, we get bootleg copies of like Hollywood, like American films, and then we watch everything, and then there's like a bunch of gangsters in like Florida, and it's like, oh my god, look at these guys, they're driving Ford Mustangs, and there's all these beautiful women and everything, and it's like, oh, so if you go to the West, that's what the West is like, right? There is that illusion, which is very effective, especially for the younger generation. So you're made to feel like, oh, so the place that you live in is a shithole, and these places are much better. But it is only when you go to these places, and again, this may go against some of the things that I have said in the past, if taken out of context, because I've always been grateful for the opportunity that I've had in the UK. To be here, to be able to freely express myself. Just the fact that you and I are having this conversation on a public platform like this, whether it's one person that listens to it or 1,000, doesn't matter. It's the fact that we're able to express ourselves in this way, right? Mm-hmm. That I have always been grateful. However, I would dare say that the way that the governments over here take advantage of their people is perhaps, at least on a moral scale, not even that different to the ones of Iran. It's just in a different, more backhanded way. You know, they kill you with cotton, as we say back home, you know, rather than the Islamic Republic, where it's like, you wrote an offensive blog about us, we're going to arrest you and murder you. And of course, the British government would never do such a thing, but the way just even everything from the mortgage system is set up to your retirement thing. It's like humans are just batteries. You've got no chance of growing or developing in your life. You're just made to stay there in that same spot. Stay there. Don't grow. Just go out and drink your alcohol on the weekends and just be stay a consumer. Do not go behind that. And that to me is no better. It's just a different way of fucking people over, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think, these are all forms of systemic control. I would describe that as, the police system here is horrific. It's so racist. I firsthand experienced racism from police here in like some very terrible contexts.
Could you make an example, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my father is a very bad person. He was abusing... he threatened to kill me, basically, multiple times. So I called the police. He was very violent, all that jazz. The police came over and they were like, "Oh, isn't there a place you people can sort this out?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He was like, "Oh, like a mosque." And I was like, "We're not Muslim." And he was just very confused.
Wow, that's fucking crazy. So is that what Muslim people are supposed to do? If someone threatens to kill them, the police can't intervene because they have to go to a mosque? What the fuck? What level of insanity have we gone to? I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I get that maybe that could be classed as racism just purely because of how ignorant it is. But is that really the state of things in this country, that the police aren't allowed to get involved with Muslims? is that because that's kind of the conclusion I'm getting from that? That's crazy.
I think they are, because if a Muslim person shoots someone, they've committed a crime. Like, I think that's bullshit. Like, the police have gotten involved with stuff that's happened in my family. I guess we're technically Muslim because my grandparents were Muslim, but we're not. I've been to a mosque, but I can't talk about it on the podcast. Not even in this country. But yeah, like,
why? What did you do? Why? You just said that you've been. So what is there that you can't talk about?
I think I told you many moons ago, but I really can't talk about it because it's very naughty.
I did a few naughty things too back in Iran, so
I didn't damage any property. I wasn't disrespectful to the Islamic faith. I was disrespectful to a monarch. Let me put it like that. Not a British one.
Okay.
Anyway, cool. So what was I saying? Yeah, basically, they did get involved. My dad did get arrested, frankly, because he was just a fucking crazy person. He did crazy shit. But the fact that at no point, I'm pretty sure on the phone, they always asked, because we had to call the police like every few weeks for a period of time. They would always ask, "Oh, are you Muslim?" The moment I would say my name, they'd be like, "Are you Muslim?" I'd be like, "No, none of us are Muslim." The moment they'd come over, there'd always be they'd ask us over and over again, "Are you Muslim? Like, is this to do with being Islamic?" No, none of it had anything to do with being Islamic. But that aside, there's far worse stuff that happens with the police system in this country. A black boy was killed a few weeks ago. A woman was murdered by a police officer last year. And when women went and said, just held some candles around a thing in a park, hell broke loose. There's stuff like that. There is a lot of systemic problems. Let me put it like that, and it does result in deaths. Nowhere near as many deaths as the Islamic regime, but it does result in deaths, a lot of which we don't hear about, frankly, because they don't put it on the news, because they don't want people to realize that we don't live in such a different world, in such a different country. And what I'm saying will probably get me in trouble in a few months' time in this country with the way things have been. Like the amount of expression that we can have, especially if we are not of a certain class, is becoming more and more limited. And I feel like the difference between here and Iran is becoming slimmer, but I've always felt that Iran was born 1984, and the West has always been more brave new world. And both of those worlds are scared of each other, but there is the same levels of control. You know, we are overloaded with pleasure, with drugs, with advertising. You know, we are forced to consume. Everything about our lives is about consumerism and being part of a working machine. We literally work more than medieval peasants. We have less free time than medieval peasants. We have less money than medieval peasants, believe it or not. You know, like the ancient Greeks would work for approximately 3 months a year, 3 to 6 months a year. The rest of the time would be feast days and just chilling the fuck out. We could be doing that too. We have more resources than ever to be doing that, but we are told that we have to go and sit in a cubicle and send emails for 9 to 10 hours a day and have meetings with people about what HR is doing. You know, all this shit, it's not about people. Like, nothing is about people anymore. It's about concepts, about narratives that have, you know, we've been pulled away from the narratives of the land, the environment, of people, of empathy and kindness, of myths about what it is to be a person, to be good to other people. And it's been replaced with, you know, these crazy fucking ideologies of Bitcoin and consumerism and, you know, buy this, invest in that so you can retire and die in like some assisted home where you'll watch TV for 10 to 15 years, maybe 5 for us, because you know the retirement age is creeping up every year. But yeah, this shit is crazy, and people are so tired that we barely have time to really do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I do completely get where you are coming from. I think on one other side of the coin, you could very easily say that, oh, we also have access to more shit than we've ever had access. You know, we're the most comfortable we have ever been. But I do completely agree that we, you know, like every person, you know, like you walk around on the street, and I'm not saying this to even fat shame people, but you walk around and you witness every person, and it's like 90% of the population is completely out of shape. Right. And it's that we are out of touch, like you said, with the nature, with environment, with the food that we eat, with everything. I mean, this is a very recurring conversation on this podcast, actually, when it comes to things like that. But I also, like I said, I do agree that, you know, sitting in a cubicle, sending that many emails a day, it's just like, the more you do it, we all have to go through this, of course, you know. So it's not like you and I are sat on fucking thrones of gold and you know, like proper Persians should be. But you know, it's not like we're doing that. But so you have to go through this, and it's like the more I have to go through it personally, the more I realize, oh yeah, this is just a distraction, you know. And above all, it just comes down to control. It comes down to control, to use human beings as fucking batteries, you know. But it's just what it is, you know. And I guess that's the purpose of those of us who are artists, is to inject some color into that forcefully. Is that, hey, take your boring shit and fuck off, you know. And that's kind of, I feel like, what we do, you know. Or it's like, well, you don't have to fuck off, but you can stick around, but watch how we're gonna do things our way. And speaking of which, if you want to go back to just the Iran background and things like that, and how women in Iran are obviously suffering the oppression in terms of hijab, but not just hijab. Like, for example, they're not allowed to ride bicycles. They're not allowed to attend football stadiums. An Iranian woman cannot leave the country without the consent of their partner, things like that. You, as someone who has the Iranian background and has the Iranian heritage and understands the Farsi language, how much do you feel like you have a responsibility towards the women of Iran when you have a voice that you can sing and that you can express yourself artistically? Do you feel any form of connection with that at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You know, this is, for me, it feels like a lot of a lot. And it's not necessarily pressure. Like, I want to do this more than anything. You know, when I realized what I was doing, because it took me a minute. Like, I was never a singer. I was always told I was a bad singer. But I realized when I started doing this that it was because I wasn't actually, I was singing the wrong stuff. You know, I was forced to sing hymns at school. I had to sing like choral, you know, I was in a choir for like 10 years and we had to sing fucking like Christmas carols, and it sucked. You know, like I was never, I think religion can be beautiful. You know, like I have done extensive study into religion at like, you know, master's, PhD level and stuff like that. However, you know, Christian music is about restraint most of the time. It's about being all like in a box, fitting in with everyone else. And then when I realized, when I accidentally essentially sang with Lowen, because originally I was just going to be the bassist, and I can't even fucking play bass. I just wanted to be in a band doing Middle Eastern music, because the only band that I could hear at the time that was doing that was System of a Down, and I wanted to make cool fucking heavy Middle Eastern music. And Melakesh too, they're amazing. I wanted to do that myself. And then, yeah, like, you know, we did some rehearsals. I was like, well, here's how I think the vocals would go. We did a demo. I did the vocals over it, and I was forced to become the vocalist. And then when I was in that state of discomfort and I was exploring how to sing, I realized, oh, I can actually do this kind of singing. And when I did it, when I got to a point where I discovered it, because there's no one in this country that teaches you how to do tahrir. No one. There's no one outside of this country that I could find that could teach me. I did it by accident. I just sat there and I listened to so much. You know, I didn't really listen to any Western music growing up. My house was, my father was kind of like a walking, talking embodiment of the regime. He wasn't pro-regime, but he was against. We couldn't dance, we couldn't sing, we couldn't talk loudly. I was not allowed to have posters on my walls because it would be worshipping people. You know, he wasn't religious, but he had a lot of religious beliefs, if you want to put it like that.
That's interesting to me, because it almost feels like, at least, I mean, I'm making assumptions here based on what you just said, but it almost feels like you at least had some form of at least assimilation, if you will, at a young age of what it might actually be like to be over there.
Yeah, totally. You know, I grew up in a really controlling and toxic environment. You know, I saw some horrific shit. I was born in Peckham. The person living above us was a heroin addict who one day tried to break into our house with a machete. We moved around London. You know, I think I lived in 6 different places until I was about 5 years old. But I also got a scholarship to a private school at the age of like 3, because I was a madly gifted child. So I was like, I had this super brain, but I also lived in this like fucking horrific environment. So, you know, that made me who I am. It made me into an artist. My mum is an artist. So I was being taken to art museums every single week by my mum from a very young age. Like, I still remember the first time I saw Francis Bacon. Like I was like holding my mum's hand above my head. That's how young I was when I saw the triptych, and it fucked me up for life in the best way possible. So yeah, I had a very mixed upbringing. There was a lot of silence, enforced silence. I was not allowed to sing. And when I finally discovered that I felt like I could relate. Yeah, I felt like I could, you know, definitely have not had as bad as an experience, by no means. Like, I don't consider myself a victim in that sense. However, yeah, I felt like I was representing, and it felt amazing to be able to do that. You know, it felt like I had a chance to connect with a sense of home, even if it's not real. It means a lot to me. You know, this is a part of my identity that I'm so grateful to have discovered. And, you know, maybe there are people in Iran who wouldn't appreciate it, but at the same time, I feel like right now, I'm not posting too much on the band account, because I don't want to be like, look at me, when there are these women out there fighting for their lives. You know, there are children being shot in the street. There are people I know whose cousins 12-year-old cousins have been shot in the head. You know, this is such a horrific time to be like, look at my art. But at the same time, I am wanting to make art so badly right now. You know, we're writing, and yeah, it's making music right now is a very emotional and powerful thing.
But I also think that, you know, for those of us who do this over here and have the opportunity to do this freely, I mean, I've given this a lot of thought, okay? And trust that if you ever see myself or my band Tribex posting anything, especially related to Iran, that this thought, there's a lot of thinking that's gone behind it, I should say. To me, I think after some years of deliberate back and forth of like, oh yeah, but I'm here and I'm free, but my friends are still there stuck, I came to the realization that, at least for me personally, it's my responsibility and it is my duty to put myself out there just so that I can be their voice. So of course there's that artistic urge that I want to express myself, and there's that, but we've made it here. So I think it is only fair to honor those who are suffering these restrictions by representing them, by making the loudest noise possible, by becoming it's a cliche saying, but voice of the voiceless. And I think that if I was someone who was over there, I would at least try and be appreciative of that, you know. And obviously it's easy when you're in such a constricted environment to also have a negative thought of like, oh, these people there, they're free, you know, and they're probably making millions off of their music, you know, meanwhile we're playing in a bar in front of 10 people, you know, and barely making pennies on Bandcamp, you know. But you know, it's like, obviously it's better than that, but still. But you know, it's like I think there's a lot of responsibility with that I think we have to accept, you know. So when I am going 110% for Tribex, it's not just for the sake of my own ego or just, oh, I want my band to be the higher up, you know, or anything like that. No, it's an acknowledgement and an acceptance of responsibility in response to all of the sacrifices made, be it for my family, be it for everyone who's helped us, or most importantly, the fact that I'm representing everyone back home who cannot do this. Everyone back home who stays in their bedroom and they create their art, and goddammit, they're fucking good, right? I'm not even saying I'm better than all of them. There's a lot of very, very talented people over there who don't get to exercise their rights of performing this music freely. So if I'm here, if I get to play shows properly, I'm going to give it 110%. And this is why you will never find me complaining about, oh, the sound wasn't very good on stage, this and that. I don't give a shit. Yeah. I'm going to fucking go and I'm going to give it everything. I don't care about these little things, right? And this is why I think it's important, you know, and this is, and obviously I appreciate completely what you're saying there as well about just how powerful it feels just to even create art at a time like this. Because I'll say this as well, we as human beings, we can be very creative and consequently empathetic. It doesn't take a lot. I mean, you watch a sad video on the internet of, I don't know, like a puppy losing its owner or something like that, and we get emotional from that, right? I don't care like how black metal and cult or fucking whatever we are. You feel some emotions when you see something like that. So how can you not feel emotions? How can you not feel a degree of relating to people if you're looking at people that are of your own in a country being completely trampled under oppression culturally and physically and financially and all levels, it's impossible to look at that and not feel their pain, even if you've not grown up there. So
Yeah.
I think it's completely natural to feel that, and it is only our responsibility to channel that and be their voice.
I find that very affirming to hear you say that, because there is definitely, you know, I worry that because I haven't been there, you know, I'm not as legitimate, I'm not as authentic. But that's why I don't try, and I don't know, that's kind of why I guess I've been in the area I have been, by trying to stick to sort of metaphor and fantasy, even though part of me just wants to scream and be more literal. And maybe I will go into those areas at some point, perhaps very soon. We'll see. It's a very, you know, because I don't know what it's like to be there. I only just have this feeling. I have this feeling of being between two places. And I guess that's where my home is. It's like kind of a nowhere place, this liminal area. And that's where my art sits. But I think, I hope that is enough. I hope that is still, you know, a way to, because I know there are other people who are in the same position as me, you know, or people who would want to be, perhaps, because, you know, I'm still in a much better position than a lot of people over there. So yeah, I do feel so much privilege, so much gratefulness for what I am able to do here. And there are times where people don't like what I'm doing. They try and stop me from doing it. They try and take that away. But no, like, I'm going to keep doing it.
Amazing. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I like to hear. What made you want to actually sing in Farsi anyway? Where did that come from? Because that's quite a unique thing, you know. And I've tried to incorporate this more over the years, but it's quite uncomfortable, isn't it? You know, like initially it's like, you know, does this work for metal? Because it's kind of uncharted territories in a sense, you know, and it's not something that you would always think would work. But I think the style that you guys do it in Lowen, and especially that obviously you've got the daf, which is the famous Persian percussion instrument, and even with the drums, you've got the do da da do da. That's a very, yes, like, you know, like we've got it in our blood, you know, it leads to you know, that's those kind of rhythms and things like that. And obviously the more Eastern or like the Phrygian scales that Shem uses and whatnot, I think it actually works really well. So what was it that prompted that you wanted to, you know, you seem to go fully in for the Middle Eastern thing in your band's music?
I just always wanted to hear it. I always wanted, this is the music that I was missing, and I always knew I was missing it. I met Shem at an Akakoka concert. I don't know how familiar you are with that band. They were the first metal band I ever listened to. They're a black and death metal band.
I'm familiar with the band, but what a weird fucking band to have as your first band to get introduced into metal.
I know, right. It's a bit weird. I picked up a copy of Kerrang in like 2006, maybe earlier. It was like the week that Antichrist came out, and I remember reading it, and I was like, fuck yeah, this sounds great.
I'm surprised you don't wear a suit on stage.
No, I don't really have the like figure for a good suit, to be honest. I love suits, but no, it's not really my style. I tend to wear like Indian wedding dresses. I find them a bit more comfortable.
I like how you do it now. I think it's a little bit more authentic.
Thank you. Cheers. I appreciate that. Yeah, I try and sort of straddle between like authenticity, but also I am being myself as well. Like this I am literally just this person. Not necessarily how I act on stage, because that is a whole different thing. Like we can talk about that in a minute, but like, fuck, what was I saying? Yeah. I met Shem in the front row of an Akakoka concert. And one of the things I said to him that night was like, I've always wanted to be in a band that does Middle Eastern metal. Because I love death metal. I love all genres of metal. But yeah, like when I was growing up, I always loved heavy music. But because I'm basically, I started learning music when I was like literally 3 years old. I started learning the piano at the free. I played saxophone, violin, all sorts of things. I'm very trained in that area. Not anymore. I don't have any theory, but I had a classical ear. Like I know all the classical stuff, musicians, all that kind of jazz. So yeah, like whenever I listen to metal, I can hear that. And I like it. You know, I love Necrophagist. I love that they have all that classical influence. But at the same time, it wasn't that different, you know, and like it didn't hit a certain part of me that I wanted it to hit, like this groove, this sort of, you know, when we do hear that rhythm, something lights up inside me when I hear those rhythms, when I hear those scales. And I didn't even know why for a really long time. And I spoke to an archaeomusicologist called Richard Dumbrell a few years ago when we were working on our EP, because I love language. I've been obsessed with language from a really young age. I love exploring languages, you know. I taught myself Biblical Hebrew when I was doing my master's because I just wanted to. It's a fascinating language. The Torah is fucking fascinating. And then, you know, a bit of ancient Greek. I love ancient languages. So for the EP, I was exploring Sumerian and Akkadians. I went and talked to Richard Dumbrell, who specializes in ancient music. And a lot of this music has been preserved in the sort of folk areas of Iraq and Iran. If you go to those areas, people are still singing in that style. They're still making music with that sort of feel and sound. Obviously, they don't know for certain, but they kind of do know at the same time, because there are tablets from thousands of years ago that go through the sort of scales that they've translated through how they did certain things. There are poems, really, really beautiful poems, where you can feel, when you read them, you can feel the music that's in them. And Dumbrell said, you know, don't worry, it's in your blood. It's literally, you know, obviously I don't physically believe that, but that he's worked with other musicians from particular parts of Iran and Iraq, and he says in his experience, and this guy is like very educated, doesn't necessarily mean he's right, there's no literal proof, but I do feel that there is something to what he's saying, that people will inherently be able to sing it in a certain way that's more authentic than, say, someone who has been classically trained, who doesn't have an inherent understanding of microtonal music, for example. You just kind of feel that there is something about singing that music, of singing certain languages, that opens up a different part of how you experience the music. And it's a really interesting thing to explore. And I don't know, I'm not saying I've done it well. You know, the EP was fully improvised. It was a very weird experience. But yeah, like singing in Iranian, it was a natural step. It was a natural step. You know, it's hard to write lyrics in Iranian for me, because, you know, Farsi was my first language, but it was still, I still don't have like the same grasp of it as someone who was raised in Iran would have naturally. You know, I don't have the slang. I don't have, I still say certain words wrong just because I've been speaking it to the same 3 or 4 people my whole life, you know? But yeah, I remember the first time I sang in Farsi, it was controversial. It was controversial. Not everyone got what I was doing. They were like, oh, this is a bit weird. But then I still kind of kept at it. And eventually it became like the favorite song on our first album was the one I sang in Farsi, because my voice just sounds better when I sing in Farsi. And I also feel like maybe it's because it's such a poetic language and the vowels are so open. And I find it to be the same with Sumerian and Akkadian. It's so much easier to sing. It's so much easier to sort of find melodies with those words when you have them in your body, when you're embodying them, even if you don't always know necessarily what they mean. If it's, you know, Sumerian or Akkadian, like I have transliterations and I have translations, I know what I'm singing, but you don't always know what every single word means, but you can still feel that you're interacting with something that is so much older than anything that you've encountered, and it's a very special feeling.
I 100% agree. I mean, first of all, Farsi is such a melodic language. I mean, if you and I were to just actually speak Farsi right now, everyone would be able to hear the difference. مثلا اگه الان من همینطوری به صورت عادی حتی با تو صحبت میکردم، این تفاوتش کاملا مشخص بود.
آره خیلی قشنگترم هست، خیلی قشنگتره.
It is. and you know, I think the thing of it is as well, our DNA carries memory, you know, and I think that this is a very important thing to remember in regards to what you just said there about what the what that gentleman had said, you know, that it is in your blood, that of course you carry that with you, you know, because even if it's off of very basic survival instincts, we carry a lot of memory throughout the generations with us. So, of course, if you are then going to start to do that, I think it's only a matter of, as I keep saying, when it comes to music performance, it's channeling. You are channeling the melody that almost already exists within you, in your DNA. Maybe you as a person weren't singing in Farsi up until that point, and I find it's really interesting how you said that you had to sing like Christian music before and you felt confined by it. It's almost a case of like the it was a silly example, but was it the Cinderella that like the right shoe had to fit or something like that? It's kind of, it feels a little bit like that to me, you know. And you've got all these different things that you have to go through in order to find what works for you, which happens to be the authentic self, that, you know, that's probably an ancient thing that lies within you, or us, I should say. That's a melody, that's a form, you know, like you say, when you hear the rhythm of the music, it's our DNA. We are already connected to that. That's already, it's buried within us, that we can immediately connect with that and we can recognize it, you know. That's why, like, we call it shisho hashed back in Iran, you know, it's the 6/8 time signature. As soon as we hear it, it's like, you know, like we start, like, you see, like that's an ancient thing, you know. It was really interesting, actually, just earlier today. Me and my partner, we were talking about different national anthems, and I have not sang the Iranian national anthem in at least maybe 13, possibly 14, maybe even 15 years. And I sang it by heart, like off of heart, like earlier today. The right melody. I sang the whole thing, just jokingly. I was trying to sing to her and just to like let her know what it sounded like, because she's not Iranian, so I was trying to explain what it sounded like. And then I did the whole thing. And afterwards, I was like, what the fuck? How do I remember this? You know, it's like, obviously, that's a strong case of neuroplasticity, you know, which is the case of basically practice makes perfect, which obviously I did used to sing that song as a child, but it was just really interesting to me. And I think it's even more confirming that you would then say that now, because like I said, it's something that we are supposed to do. We recognize it, you know, and it's not just you and I as who we are now, but it's the many generations, it's our grandparents, it's everyone that came before us, that their memory is still within us, and we carry that. And because that's what we are, that's what we humans are. We're the descendants of our ancestors.
Yeah, I think music is such a powerful form of communication as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's used in so many different ways, you know, like a national anthem. It's a declaration of what you sound like, you know, it's a declaration of who you are. And that's really interesting, because I'm not a fan of most national anthems. I find them very boring. They've got that slow, halting rhythm. usually 4/4 because it's civilized. You know, a lot of Western classical music was created with these notions of civility and restraint and social activities such as waltzes and things like that. You know, all this nonsense.
And we should also point out that there's two different Iranian national anthems. There's the post-Islamic Revolution, and then there's the one before that, which is just fucking majestic. And that's the one I was singing earlier. You know, and you compare that to anything else that you will hear in like the Olympics, and it's like, fuck, these guys have got nothing on us.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? I think music, when it's used in such ways, is really fascinating. It's very similar to religious music as well. You know, like church music is the fucking worst. Like some of the harmonies, yeah, they're okay, but I hate it. However, like I was, I don't know if you noticed, I was engaged to a Jewish guy for about 5-6 years. So during that time, I actually started converting to Judaism. I didn't fully convert. I was, it's like 2 months before I went into the mikveh that things fell apart. However,
sorry to interject. Do not forget what you were going to say, but I can't help but say this. I don't think anything else said in the interview would get you in trouble in Iran, but what you just said there, that definitely
would get me in trouble. 100%. And that was a big, you know what? Like I literally had to like, when you go in the mikveh, you have a Jewish name. You take on a Jewish name. And like they put out like a thing in the newsletter, like, oh look, Nina's now blah blah blah. You know, this is her new. She's great, wonderful. I had to literally go have a meeting with the rabbi and be like, look, please do not post anything about me being here. Please do not celebrate my existence in any way. I beg of you. And they totally understood. They were amazing. But yeah, the main thing that I really took away, and it was actually the biggest influencing factor on how the music got made for the first album, was the fucking music in Simorgh was amazing. It was so beautiful. And basically it was Sephardi music. So it was the more sort of like Eastern Jewish tradition that was being sung. And, you know, every Saturday you'd go in the morning, there'd be a chazan and he'd sing what was written. And it was stunning. Like I'd be moved to tears. Some of the poetry, you know, a lot of it is Mesopotamian, fascinatingly. Yeah. So a lot of it is very close to where we're from. You know, there's a lot of crossover. Obviously, you know, Persians and there was the liberation of the Jews in Babylon. So really, like going back, there's a lot of crossover between Persian and Jewish culture. You know, the highest concentration of Jews outside of Israel in the Middle East is in Iran. They have like 13 synagogues in Isfahan alone. Like it is actually a really religiously diverse country. However, you can't convert to any religions. You can only convert to Islam. And if you're Baha'i, fuck you, is the regime's sort of like stance on this matter, which is absurd, you know? But yeah,
I mean, that's the actual stance on the Quran as well. You know,
oh, is it? I haven't read the Quran. It's one of the few books I've not read.
If you, obviously the regime stands by this anyway. But yeah if you convert to anything other than Islam, and that is even if you're born Muslim, so you had no choice in the matter, you basically become murtad, so you can get killed. And it's a very nice religion. Love it.
Yeah,
I mean, Islam does actually. There's a verse specifically that says that they will get retribution on the Jews and that they will pay. I don't remember the exact number of the verse, but there's a legit verse in the Quran.
It's very sad because from my understanding, what I was taught, and I don't know if I'm remembering this very well, is that a lot of Islam was based on Judaism, and there was a very close relationship between, you know, in the formative years of Islam, between Islamists and Jewish scholars, you know. However, when the Jews refused to convert to Islam, that's when stuff got bad. That's when all that ridiculous anti-Semitic shit got inserted into the text. That's my understanding. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's very sad. You know, there was the golden era, supposedly in Spain, where Jewish, Christian, and Islamic scholars got together, made some great art and poetry, wrote some interesting texts.
That's true.
Yeah. You know, I personally, I have slightly different views to most people when it comes to religion. I don't think religion is a bad thing. I think people ruin religion. I think, you know, a lot of these interpretations, for example, I think it's Leviticus in the Torah, you know, it doesn't say don't have gay sex. It just says don't live with other guys. don't have a batch pad with other guys because you won't end up marrying women. There's loads of
see,
gay shit in the Torah.
There's some really weird things, like, and this is, I apologize in advance.
No, of course.
This is very inappropriate, but it's like you see lots of very weird things where religion gets involved with these like tiny details of your life. And I guess there's it does, like spirituality to me is very much connected to all other aspects of life, so to me, that's very much connected to psychology, to your physical experience of life. I think it all works in tangent as far as the human experience is concerned, by my estimate at least. But there's very weird things, like, this is why I was saying it's a bit inappropriate. It's like, even Khomeini, didn't he come out and say something really ridiculous like, oh yeah, people can have anal sex, but you can only put the tip of the instrument in. And it's
just
like,
the tip. Wow.
Yeah, just the tip. It's like, what the fuck? Who comes up with this shit? Like did God come down to you and then say like, hey, Khomeini, if you ever want to slip around the back door, that's fine. Just make sure it's just the tip. Don't go any further. It gets a bit dangerous after that. It's like, how the fuck do you guys come up with this? And then how do people then buy it? How do thousands and millions of people buy this shit? It's very odd to me. And there's like little things like that in Christianity too, and a lot of other religion. Yeah. There's this part. Listen, I am with you that religion can actually be a very positive tool. And I know I say this whilst wearing a Morbid Angel fucking long sleeve and having all of these. I've got a Black Witchery poster over there. I get it. No, I understand. But see, there's one thing to become your best self, but then there's another thing to become your best self for the sake of supporting what I would call, it's just another brand, which is what a lot of organized religion is, I would say.
I agree with you on that point. I think it's a very fine line. I think that my view is that religion in itself can be incredibly beautiful. Some of my favorite texts are actually religious texts. However, I do not think it's good for religion to be involved when it comes to the state, when it comes to determining law. I mean, back in the times where those religions were created, that was the best thing you had. You didn't have the sort of infrastructure that could barely support so-called democracy as we have now. Like back then it was very different. So those religions were like how people were surviving some very weird fucking things, natural disasters, people falling ill after they eat an oyster or some shit like that, weird shit happening. That was the closest thing they had to explaining the universe around them. That was their narrative that they needed to get through the world, to have families where you didn't sacrifice your children for no reason. There's some really fascinating things. For example, in Judaism, when it comes to kosher, there's insane levels of scholarship that's taken place over how you do kosher, because obviously in the Torah there's a few paragraphs here and there. It's more than a few, but the interpretation of Hebrew is so complicated. So many of the words mean multiple things. So there's many different interpretations of different things you can have. There's a scholar, one of the scholars, his view, he's like one of the most respected, is that when it comes to, I think, God, it's been years since I've thought about this, but there's there's the concept of like, if it's bigger than an olive, this is the one of the rules of thumb, is if it's bigger than an olive, then it's like contaminant, like say you can't mix meat and milk. The reason is because back in the day when all this stuff was written, there were pagan rituals where there would be a baby lamb that was sacrificed, and they'd sacrifice it and put it in its mother's milk. And they didn't want the whole reason that culture, that religion grew, is because they didn't want to be engaging in child sacrifice. And in the religions of the time, they wanted to kind of have these communities that were structured in the way that they were. So they had these special food laws to set themselves apart from other people, which is, vegans do that, carnivore diet people do that, all sorts of people do that. Diet is like a huge part of culture. Iranians, we have a fucking amazing diet.
We got the best one.
If I say so myself. However, you know, like, I think it's fascinating that people care so much about this stuff that they will go through such lengths to come up with the notion of like, oh, if you have an olive-sized amount of chametz, of like of I think wheat-based products during Passover, that's bad. You can't have that. But if it's less, don't worry about it. You know, we know it's difficult for you to do all this crazy shit. Like, I love that stuff exists. I love that people put so much thought into things. I don't love when people put so much thought into how much they don't like gay people. And they're like, well, I think we're going to interpret this passage in this way. Fuck you, gay people. You're all dead. Like, I hate that shit. That's when people ruin it, you know? But the religion itself, it's words, it's narrative.
Don't all religions collectively hate on the homosexuals?
I don't know about all religions, maybe the Semitic ones. But that passage I was talking about earlier in Leviticus isn't actually about homosexuality. If you read it in the original Hebrew, which I have, it's about cohabitation, and what they're trying to do, it's my belief is in that passage, is to dissuade young men from not taking wives and just having a bachelor lifestyle and growing old and never having children, so that they can continue. Because, you know, in Judaism, it's through the mother that Jewishness is preserved. And this was intentionally so that there would be more family units. You know, a lot of, from what I understood about the religion, how it was taught when I was going to synagogue was about actually relationships, about having really great relationships, really great family ties, which for me is a really important thing. You know, I grew up with like one very shit family member, but my family is so important to me. It's those relationships, my close relationships, are the most important thing in my life, and I value them more than anything. And that really helped me sort of understand that was something I valued. And I don't go around adhering to laws or things like that from religions and stuff, but religion has helped me understand what I value and how I want to value it.
I can completely appreciate that sentiment. And I think onto that point, it might be a really good time to bring up what you guys experienced in the band with one of your ex-members. I mean, obviously, I'm aware of what happened more or less, but could you just explain in detail what happened? Because it was was it your old drummer?
Yeah, it was. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to get sued. But yeah,
can you even sue people in the UK?
I don't fucking know, man. Like, there's been so much shit that's happened with this guy that I wouldn't put anything past him. So basically, at the beginning of the pandemic, his mental health took a dive. We found out after everything happened that his parents met in a mental institution. His dad was a heroin addict, schizophrenic, and we realized that probably this is what he was suffering with too. He became obsessed with like conspiracy theories, all this like right-wing YouTube stuff, which is, you know, I'm extremely left-wing. I don't argue with people about it, but those are my views, and those are the views of the band, because the band is about me and my experience. So like, if someone's going to turn around and say some shit about Jews, I'm going to be like, no, you know, like, that doesn't belong here. And he didn't like that. He didn't like that I had a different opinion. I don't really get argumentative. I don't really get offended if people have different views. I'm just like, if you have a different view, if you're not going to force that on me, that's okay. But I'm not going to associate with people with extreme views, you know?
You don't strike me as someone who would be argumentative at all, actually.
I mean, we've had a really great conversation today, and there are things that we've both said that neither of us agree with, but we respect each other, you know, like, yeah, that's okay. I value exchanges like this, because this is how you learn. This is how you grow.
Likewise, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the whole point of being a person. But yeah, he didn't have the same worldview. He became increasingly misogynistic, increasingly racist. He said some really horrific stuff. He did some really horrific stuff. There was the night my grandmother died, he got very drunk and he tried to grab me. And I did not like that. I said no, I yelled no. Shem had to come running in, stop that from happening. And after that, things just got really bad, really, really bad. I did not feel safe physically around him. Eventually, he left the band, citing that I was a narcissist, that I was toxic and controlling. I'm sure people who know me can come to their own conclusions on how I am.
Yes, you are absolutely all of those things, 100%.
I'm such a terrible, terrible person. But yeah, like, you know, he left.
That's unfortunate. That's a very it's sad to hear of something like that. I mean, even let's say on the extreme hypothetical that those accusations were true.
Yeah.
What do you gain out of going online and
doing what
trying
he did?
trying to do that? Yeah. So
yeah.
Please.
So
continue.
that was the beginning. That was the beginning. You know, it was fine. We carried on. He decided that we owed him lots of money, which we didn't, never have. And he basically stole our demos that we'd been working on for a long time. After he'd left the band, we found out that he'd been doing this. He'd been storing them on his own drive months before he left. So he was planning this for a long time. He started storing them after I rejected him when he tried to grab me when he was drunk. So what he did is he uploaded these demos on YouTube with the flags and symbols of the Islamic regime, with specific factions and groups of them who were involved in the torture of close members of my family. He emailed hundreds of press people with links to the video, pretending it was new music. He cited himself as one of the writers of this music, as well as my name, which implicated me because, you know, it's considered a terrorist organization. You know, these flags, these symbols, everything that represents, not only is that a terrorist organization, but that is against everything that I stand for as a person. As anyone who's been listening thus far will understand, that's a very extreme attack on me. It was a very distressing and traumatic thing to see this music that I poured my heart and soul into uploaded with those symbols and those images. You know, that's like another level of fucked up. And then to email that to all these people, he made like a fake email with like a fake Iranian name, then like a fake Chinese account where he was like Facebook messaging people and banned accounts, this music he wanted everyone to see. It got taken down. We thought everything was over. It was not over. He stole my guitar. He stole one of my guitars. He posted it online pretending it was a gift. Whatever. I don't have my guitar anymore. I don't care. He can have it. He knows he stole it. He put a GPS tracker on my boyfriend's car when my boyfriend was at work, and then messaged.
Fucking hell.
This happened recently. He then messaged my boyfriend saying, I know where you live. This is what your house looks like. This is where you live. Here's your address. He admitted, he was like, oh, check the wheel arch of your car. I've put a GPS tracker there. He admitted to it. We called the police. They were like, oh, there's nothing we can do. You know, like the YouTube thing, that was classed as a non-crime hate crime, whatever that means. They were like, it's obviously a racist hate crime, but it's not, because it's so specific. It's not actually a crime because it's such a weird and fucked up thing this guy's done. It's too specific to, you know. So every point he's planned and done like weird, crazy shit. He's like, you know, I don't know.
Almost seemed like it was too difficult for the police to even explain what had actually happened, right? Because it's just like, how the fuck did you do that? Because it's not like he went on there and said, oh yeah, he hated all the Iranians, or it's not like he went on there. You know, it would have been a lot easier if he just did that. But he went there and on your behalf essentially posted your music with symbolism that is completely against everything that you and the band stand for.
It was, and you know, for me to come out and say I don't stand for this put me in danger. It was something that put me further away from Iran. It's something that could have put, you know, people in my family who share similar names, or, you know, the government do their research. You know, if me coming out and saying I don't stand with this, it put them in danger too. So
and they do. And to anyone who might think, oh, they don't, what are these people talking about?
they fucking do.
They absolutely do. They'll know the smallest underground bands that you think they wouldn't give a shit about, you know. And this is why the last time I went back years ago, I was scared shitless, you know. Like, I mean, I still had long hair, and I had to hide it all in my beanie, and then I had to wear like a white shirt, and then have the collar all the way up here, because and even though Trivex maybe at the time had, I don't know what, like 500 likes on Facebook, I was like, I am not fucking getting into trouble because that's what they are like. I mean, we had our friends. There was a Persian metal festival happening in Armenia, in Yerevan, back in, I think, September 2012. So just over 10 years ago now. And it was a small festival, you know. It was headlined by Arsemis. Arsemis, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
They're more well-known. I used to play in the band for about a year or so afterwards as well. Obviously, they're well known, but the rest of the bands, they're not really that well known, especially in the Middle East or anywhere else for that matter. But some of my friends, they used to play in a band called Persian Force, which is now called Kamarikon. They're two twin brothers, you know, really great guys. And they actually did the reamps for the Trivex album, because I wanted to have our album reamped over in Iran just to record the air of the country, if that's crazy enough to you know, for just you know, just to even do that. But these guys, they were playing that festival, and on their way out of the country, the border patrol pulled them in, because when you're in Iran, you have borders to go out, and then you have borders to come in. Some countries do this, but many don't. You just show up to the airport and go straight up to your gate. And this is why I was like super confused. Like, going around in Europe, it's like, oh shit, there's no gates to go through. We can just, there's no like borders to go through. We just go through the gate. Oh
yeah.
There's no one searching us. Oh, okay. You know, and the searching thing is because that, like, you go through like multiple different ones back in Iran, every city, like with no question. And on the way out of the country, they got pulled in, and the guy was like, you know, so, and they already knew what band they were in, and they're this tiny fucking underground band with no albums, right? So you can carry on that point. I just wanted to back the point to say that they do the research, they know their shit. So yeah.
I appreciate you weighing in on that, because yeah, exactly. You know, it put me and my family in a very bad position. It was all intentional. Literally a few weeks ago, he messaged me. He's just delusional. You know, I haven't said a word to this guy in about 2 years, and not a single word. The last message I sent to him was like, please don't communicate with me again. Like, I wish you the best. Just please don't communicate with me again. I will consider it harassment. And he's done nothing but harass me. The last message he sent was he thought that I got his music pulled from a YouTube channel. And he was like, oh, if you mess with me again, I'll tell your dad where you live. You know, it was,
whoa.
Okay, sure. I'm you know, what next? Like, I'm just not surprised. There's always something. Every few months he'll just try and do something to make things, you know, difficult, stressful. I don't go out alone anymore. I don't go to gigs very much anymore, especially in London. I don't go anywhere where he might be, because I don't know what he'll do. You know, he's like an angry, delusional man. And it's a shame, because he was kind of okay and normal for a few years. But then looking back, we noticed there was a lot of weird stuff that we were just kind of forgiving. We would be like, oh, you know, maybe he's a bit neurodivergent. You know, we all are to some degree, and we're very accepting of stuff like that. But we were too accepting, and we let too much stuff slide. And I've learned a very valuable lesson from that. And yeah, I mean, nothing like that. I'm never going to let anyone do anything like that to me ever again.
Yeah, you know, I think the most you could probably, I mean, that's really dodgy. You know, I would hate to. I mean, I've had my own dealings with idiots before. You know, but I can't claim to have had an experience like that, because the reason why that's so awkward is because, I mean, all the safety issues aside, just the whole thing of just wanting to make it as an artist and get your music heard, the fact that you now know that the first impression of a lot of magazines and these websites get from you is like, oh yeah, this guy getting in touch saying like, oh yeah, this is our music, and then you trying to tell them, hey, this is not what we stand for. And then it's like this awkward thing of like having to explain to strangers that you haven't done anything wrong kind of situation, you know. And it's like it's the same as obviously before that you weren't really having to take much of a stance on the for example the whole Islamic Republic thing, but then now you are having to come out and say, hey, listen, this is not what we fucking stand for, fuck these guys. So that's obviously a negative, but also on the bright side, you know, I always look at life in a kind of a weird superficial way, but I think it works really well for me. And it's that everything happens for a reason. And sometimes there are some really shitty events which you just don't need that shit in your life. But sometimes there can be necessary goods that can come out of it. Now, obviously, the whole thing with the GPS and then this guy, like just the fact that you can't go to places, I think that's fucking terrible. That's bullshit, you know, and this person really needs to take a look at their own life and just, you know, I mean, it's weird to me. It's like, how would someone even have the time to invest so much focus and attention just to like fuck with someone else? It's like, go work on yourself, man. You know, like just like dedicate like an hour to, I don't know, just write your own music, go to gym, do whatever. Like you'll feel a lot better. You know, focus on yourself. But and the thing of it is that the bright side of it, even though it's perhaps not what you were intending for, is the fact that at least you had no choice but make your stance. That you had to come out and say, hey, we're not on par with these groups. I mean, anyone with common sense, you know, like these like the Islamic groups themselves, just the fact that you're on stage singing without a hijab, that is a death sentence that I don't think most people even realize that would be the consequences of such a thing. But I think so if that's already what they think, maybe it's not such a bad thing that you have to come out and say, hey, I don't support the Islamic groups. I don't support those people who have those laws. So, you know, in that sense, maybe not the worst thing in the world. And at the very least, in the end of it all, it ended up getting you some kind of publicity, I guess. So maybe it's not so bad in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it was good. And the response we got was actually kind of mad in a good way. You know, when we initially, because I didn't post about the petty stuff on the band page. I only posted about the Islamic stuff because that was what was relevant to the band. The rest was more personal and like, yeah, that doesn't. I don't want to be one of those bands that does those petty social media feuds because like that's not what we're about. I'm not gonna bring ourselves down by talking about that on our social media. I will talk about it on stuff like this because people need to know, like, this is the crazy shit that happens when you're in a band and you're not white and you're doing some crazy, you know, you're doing something that's this on the edge. People will try and hurt you. Even people who aren't in the Islamic regime, people will take advantage of you like that. They will try and hurt you. There's a really interesting art piece by Marina Abramovic where she kind of like signed this legal document that was like, I consent to anything to be done to me in the next like sort of 4-8 hour period. And she stood in this gallery completely naked, and there was like a series of objects around her, like feathers, objects for pleasure, objects for pain. Initially, people were like nervously sort of touching her and tickling her and like having fun with her. And then after several hours, people were cutting her.
I'm aware of this, by the way. I saw this before. I think there was like a bunch of like pens and things like that. And then there's like a before and after picture of her as well that you can see what they did to her.
Basically, the point I was making was in this exhibition, it got to a point where there was a loaded gun as one of the options that people had to interact with Abramovic. And they had to cut the exhibition short because someone picked up the gun. And they were obviously going to shoot her. And, you know, at the end of this exhibition, she'd been like sexually abused. She'd been cut. She'd been like gone through a horrible thing. And what she said afterwards was really powerful. She said that basically it's not a big journey. You know, if you're in a weak or vulnerable position, people will very quickly turn against you. They will very quickly hurt you, even if it's just because they're interested to see what it's like to hurt someone. If they see they can hurt you, they'll do it. And it's a really upsetting lesson to learn. And yeah, like I feel like that's kind of what happened with this guy. You know, people sometimes think I'm I have, since then, my boundaries are a lot higher. I've always had very high boundaries. And sometimes people want to push those down because they're so high, because I'm so selective. You know, even among my close friends, very few of them are in my life every day. You know, I don't talk to any of my friends every single day. And we have very strong friendships. You know, like I'm just that kind of person where I like the expectation to control and own me at a level where you're interacting with me constantly every single day, which is what this person wanted, is absurd. You know, like I'm not available like that, and I won't be available like that for anybody.
Yes, I completely understand what you are saying in terms of boundaries. And to be honest with you, I don't think that you would even really want to have many people in your life who need you every day like that. I think that oftentimes the best connections that we make in life, or at least for me personally as well, is ones where it's people who've got their own thing going on and they focus on themselves. And I do the same thing, but then sometimes we meet in the middle where we share these things. And I think that's where human connections can become valuable. And if you constantly rely on someone else, that is probably a sign that you're just trying to use that person to fill some kind of a void within yourself, which obviously this person, you know, has all the statistics of, just being crazy obsessive. You know, that you cannot be in the wrong, if you will. And I think that's kind of how a lot of these things happen.
And yeah, that was kind of, in a way, actually a point of growth for the band. And it made people who weren't previously aware of us, because everyone shared that. They were like, holy shit, we didn't know about certain things, about the government. You know, they didn't really realize how dangerous my position was. And they were very supportive, and I really appreciated that. And it was really amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I think you came out of it even stronger than you were before. So really, it's just onwards and upwards from here. And you have the opportunity to share your music with the world. And, you know, I think it's really good. And I do think that you're doing something very special too. So it's great. And tell you what, I really enjoyed our conversation tonight as well. It's been a real blast. I mean, I always enjoy catching up with my fellow Persians, but especially this. I think we covered a lot of very interesting stuff. Is there anything you would like to share with the audience before we conclude things completely?
Yeah, sure. We actually just put up a pre-order for a shirt today of Simorgh taking out Azidahaka's serpents. It's a black version of the long sleeve. So if anyone wants to grab that, go grab it, because it's cheaper until we start manufacturing it officially. Also, I want to say I love the single that you dropped a few days ago, Serpent's Gaze. It rocks. So
Thank
go
you.
check that out as well if you're listening.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's good to finally get that one out there. Yeah. And just for clarification for everyone listening as well, a Simorgh is a phoenix. So yeah, the shirt design, that sounds cool. I'll have to check that out. Actually, I haven't seen that. Do you guys have any shows, any new music or anything else coming up soon?
So the music is in progress. It's going to be very different from anything else we've released. Incredibly different. It's a huge change in our sound. There's a lot more death metal influence. There's going to be more other languages, more crazy shit. And we
more
have a
goblins.
show. Maybe. We'll see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And you said you got a show as well?
We have a show in London on March, I think, oh my God, I think it's the 4th. It's on a Sunday. It's for Masters of the Riff Festival. There's going to be a really great lineup for that. It's organised by London Doom Collective. So that'll be really fun. It'll be nice. We'll hopefully play lots of new material when we're out.
That sounds awesome. Obviously, to everyone listening, go and check out Lowen and Nina's work. I'll be sure to link everything. Nina, thank you so much for jumping on. It's been a real pleasure. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. And it's been a real cool one.
Thank you. It was really cool to talk to you. It's always special to talk to someone who understands like the positions that we're in.
Ma mun klaar about it, yeah.
Exactly.
Amazing. Right. Well, thank you so much. And to the audience for listening, thank you all so much. If you've made it so far, we appreciate you giving us your time, and hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Cheers.